Jesus on animal sacrifice, next on OneGospel. Jesus' Sermon on the Mountain continues. This is taken from Matthew 5:23 through 26. Now Jesus had previously said, "Unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Torah teachers and Pharisees, by no means will you enter into the kingdom of the heavens." So he's going to continue to show us what this looks like. Therefore, if you bring your offering to the altar, and remember there that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go away. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and bring your offering. Agree with your opponent quickly while you are on the road with him, so that at any time the opponent may not deliver you to the judge, and the judge deliver you to the servant, and you are cast into prison. Truly I say to you, you shall by no means come out of there until you have paid the last quadrans. So he says, if you bring your offering to the altar. Well, what's the altar? The word for altar in Greek that's being used here is said to only refer to altars with animal sacrifices. So specifically, we're talking about animal sacrifice. However, the Hebrew word mizbech, something like that, is somewhat more general to all altars. So it could be for animals, grain, or incense. So where is this altar that he's speaking of? Well, altars prescribed by the Torah for the Israelites included an altar of earth outside of the tabernacle. The tabernacle was the mobile place of worship for the children of Israel before they had a temple. So they had an altar of earth right outside of it. They had at the door a bronze altar for burnt offerings. They had a golden altar of incense before or in front of the ark and the mercy seat. But it wasn't just the tabernacle. There was also prescribed by the Torah. There was a stone altar on Mount Ebal as they were entering the promised land. And of course, before the Torah, before there was a tabernacle at all, there was lots of altars. And even after the tabernacle, but before there was a temple, there was altars. Even when there was a temple, there was other altars, which weren't necessarily smiled upon by the pious. However, they existed. So there's lots of altars. Now, the altar of earth was likely replaced by what was called the altar of the Lord, or the altar of Yahweh, in front of the vestibule, kind of like a lobby. So it's in front of the lobby of the temple. And that was the first temple. But in the second temple, they had the same general setup. So there was an altar right outside of the true part of the sanctuary that ordinary people would have come up to and I guess given their offering to the priest to then sacrifice the animal. This is probably what Jesus is talking about. So he says, hey, when you go there, leave your gift there, your gift meaning the animal, before the altar, meaning in front of it. Like, just leave it there and walk away if... Now, why would he say this? There are a few potential reasons. Why would he say to walk away if you have something against your brother? Well, Torah specifically values human life more than sacrifice. Exodus 21:14 says, if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, meaning he, used deception to kill him. You shall take him from my altar that he may die. So, what does this mean? Well, it's because there's no ransom for killing. There's no substitute for killing. You can't go to the altar and give a sacrifice because you did murder. Neither is there sanctuary neither is there sanctuary at the altar. You can't be like, well, I'm in the altar. You can't arrest me. You can't, grab me so I can pay my crime. So Jesus is expanding on this this specific concept of that, that sacrifices, you can't go and do a sacrifice at the altar for murder. He is saying as a wider thing that you shouldn't be doing a sacrifice for any legitimate offense against another person. So if your brother has something against you that's legitimate, you shouldn't go to the altar. You should go to him first, because he, the person, is more important than doing a ritual slaying of an animal. Now, he may also, this second reason, why else would Jesus be saying this? He may also be saying that one cannot achieve ritual forgiveness because they had different types of offerings. One was for sin, which is a general state of sin. One was for the trespass, which is the actual offense that was done. Well, you can't actually achieve forgiveness without personal reconciliation. That's also consistent with Torah, which says in many places, if you do something bad against somebody, there's lots of these different doing something bad. I mean, a common one would be stealing. So if you steal, you have to pay the person back more than what you actually stole from them. But it's not just stealing. There's other things where basically you have to do reparations. I know it's totally foreign to our idea. Our idea in America is, you do something bad and they throw you in jail, as opposed to you do something bad and you pay the person back. I know, God's weird. Anyway, another thing he's saying is that loving your neighbor, going and reconciling with your brother is truly more important than animal offerings. And he says this multiple places in the future after this sermon. He says, but you go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not a sacrifice. He says this again. If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the blameless. Now you might say, what is the context of this? Well, here's the context, because he says it again later. I just didn't give you all the context with the first two. And the Torah teacher said to Jesus, well, Rabbi, you have spoken the truth, that there is one God, and there is no other but he, and to love him with all the heart, with all the understanding, with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is more than all of the whole burnt offerings and the sacrifices. When Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. So Jesus consistently says that how you treat other people is more important than the rituals that you do in religion. And then he says, after you've reconciled with your brother, then come and bring your offering. So this is one of the uncomfortable things that Christians don't like. he didn't say, oh, animal sacrifice, it's bad, don't do it. Actually, he said, no, actually, when you've reconciled with your brother, then you come and bring your offering. And that's because that's what he said. And now people look back at that time and go, man, animal sacrifice, that's horrible. Well, is it? I mean, I realize some of y'all don't eat meat, and I don't blame you for not eating meat. But, most of humanity throughout history, out of necessity, ate animals. And, they had to die. Every single one of them. Not one of them gave up a leg without dying. So, really, if you look at what happens with the sacrifice, most of these sacrifices were rituals that were people coming together and then actually eating the animal. I mean, they burnt part of the animal. They might, especially the organs and the fatty parts. And some of the meat would have been, sacrificed as well. Like, for example, the Passover lamb. Whatever wasn't eaten in that meal, you burnt the rest of it. So you didn't save it. So it isn't like 100% being eaten, but it's being eaten. It's not just, the animal isn't just wasted. But the animal's death was painting a picture. And it's because from the very beginning, sin, which means to do something you ought not be doing, or to not do something that you ought to be doing. Sin has consequence. It affects everything around you, and it matters. And Jesus was not in that moment eliminating animal sacrifice. He was just explaining to them that ritual was not as important as being reconciled with your brother. So we're going to go further on. He has even more to say about the Torah. The next thing we're going to talk about touches on something else that most American Christians ignore. So tune in if you want. Nice hanging out with you.